Joker, Folie, Deux is now playing in theaters, and if you have not seen it yet, this is going to be a spoiler-filled review of the movie. There's a few things I definitely want to talk about a lot more, expand on some thoughts that I had in my original review, and so without further ado, let's get into it. Like I said in that original review though, I thought this movie was a bit of a mixed bag. It's definitely a step below the first one in considerable ways, and while there are things that I liked about it, there are also some decisions that did leave me a bit baffled, and I didn't like all the execution of even the stuff that was there. When I left the movie, I kept thinking about it and whether or not it would improve or it would change over time. But now, having done two different reviews of it, including one in writing for a friend of mine, I find myself continuously perplexed by what this movie has ended up being. The legacy that it'll have is what is something that crosses my mind more and more, because right now it's even more divisive than the first movie. But is that going to be the case in the future? Are people going to see it and go, oh, actually, we missed the subtext, and now when you really think about it, it's really interesting? Or is it going to be a staying alive situation where, people saw the first Saturday Night Fever, you think you got the entire story with Tony Moreno, and then someone tells you, oh, there was a sequel a few years later, and then the sequel was not nearly as good, and so you're like, well, forget about that. And so Saturday Night Fever is the start and ending of Tony Moreno's story. As of right now, it's just an extremely divisive movie that not a lot of people are loving, but there are, of course, those who do as well. And it's a movie that I maintain has that kind of reaction to it, and I feel like it's a valid one. Like, if you walked out of this saying you loved it, great. If you walked out of it saying you hated it, totally fine. It's a movie that warrants a lot of conversations around it, even if you don't think it's particularly, deep in any such way. It's just a fascinating movie. And one of the more fascinating aspects of it is just how much of a deconstruction it is of its own first movie. That first movie was already a deconstruction of the Joker character, but this one deconstructs even everything that movie did. And a lot of that has to do with the backlash the first movie got, especially when it came to what the movie could inspire. Like, at the time when the movie came out, there was news about actual violence happening because the movie might result in people doing things like the Joker. Obviously, that did not happen. It's not like you walked out of the theater and saw, Midtown Manhattan on fire. That's not gonna happen with Folie, Deux, and that's also because the movie calls out a lot of that pretty extensively. The idea of people taking Arthur's actions and trying to make them out into something that is ultimately not very positive, and sort of calling out the fact that if that was something that influenced you, it should never have done that in the first place. And I found that to be interesting because as a result of this, they give you a chance to really break down Arthur Fleck's character even more and sort of look through the cracks, the facade, if you will, of him being the Joker. It's like, this is not really you. Which makes sense because when you look at the first movie, even, everything that's gone on with Arthur, this is a man who has been pushed and pushed and pushed to the point of becoming something that he doesn't want to see himself as. But there is a level of elation to it, which is felt. Like when he kills the three guys on the subway, after he kills them, there is that fear, like, oh God, what have I done? But then he's also dancing and feeling free in that moment, and there is that aspect of it that is juxtaposed with it. I found that to be interesting, but then in this movie, there are moments where that's looked at from a different perspective, and it's like, I hope you realize that what all you did, it's not really good stuff. As that courtroom trial commences and you have Harvey Dent asking these questions to other characters from the first movie, being like, you tell us your version of the story, which is interesting because most of the first movie is Arthur's perspective. But even though a lot of it was fantasy, like Sophie, Zazie Beetz, that relationship wasn't real. But the movie sort of putting it in that perspective of that fear he created is something that's interesting. It leads to the best scene of the movie where Gary takes the stand, his coworker, and he throws Arthur's lines from the first movie back at him about how he was the only person who didn't make fun of him at work, and that's why he let Gary live while he killed Randall. But Gary throws that back, saying, like, this isn't you. And Arthur challenges him, like, so you don't think this is me? And he says, no, because I used to, I hated going to work. I don't go back. You were the only one who was nice to me and didn't make fun of me. And you've traumatized me. And he says it right then and there. And I wish the movie had a lot more of that, because every now and then it taps into those aspects of the character's story, and I thought that's good. But oftentimes we lose focus of that because, and this is kind of a polarizing positive from the original review I had, the stuff with Harley Quinn. Now, I like Lady Gaga as Lee. I think she's great in the movie, and she has an excellent singing voice, and she does a really good job. But then her entire characterization is done almost to the side of things. And most of the explanations that we get are from other characters, particularly Arthur's lawyer, who's like, whatever she's telling you is not who she is. Like, you met her at Arkham, right? And she told you that she had an upbringing similar to you, and then she burned her parents' house down, and she was in the same neighborhood. That's not true. She comes from money. She has a degree in psychology, and she got into Arkham really just to get to know you. Like, she is kind of like a stalker, and she's just trying to use you because you are also the Joker. And there's this entire thing going on about trying to convince the jury that Arthur and Joker are two different halves. It's a split personality thing. And that factor, again, would be interesting, but again, the movie just does it in a way that feels very much sidelined. And this is also hindered by the musical sequences, which in the original review I said were well done, and I still stand by that, but the inclusion of them in some places could be better, especially when it comes to the context of certain scenes and keeping that momentum of the story going and how it factors into the other themes of the story. And sometimes they work really well. Sometimes they work wonderfully with the context of those scenes. Like, there's one really great moment where while Joker is in the courtroom, he sort of imagines a scene playing out in his head where he whacks Harvey Dent and the judge, and there's a point where Lee takes Harvey's blood and makes a smile on her face. I thought, that's demented. That's okay, that works. But a lot of this is, like I said, in Arthur's head, all of this is happening. I just think that there could have been a few more moments like that, because there's also some moments where the singing is not needed and it just makes a scene go longer than it needs to. Like, there's a quick conversation that Harleen and Arthur are having across like the glass, that visiting area, and she's talking to him that, oh, she's pregnant. It's like, oh my god, this is big information. And then she bursts into song about, like building a life together, and it's very random to the point that there were people in my theater who started laughing when that happened. They do have one foreshadowing dream musical sequence though, where they have a talk show of their own called Joker and Harley, and after the opening number and their intro remarks, Harley shoots Joker. And this is supposed to foreshadow that she's gonna probably stab him in the back, and that's something that the lawyer alludes to as well. And eventually, when Arthur starts to call out that idea of how people perceive him, his supporters start to dwindle away, and one of them happens to be Lee, and she doesn't love him anymore because she loved the Joker, not Arthur. And so that's an aspect that eventually does play up. Again, I just wish we had a little bit more time on focusing on this. Of course, there's the ending of the movie, which is what you guys really want to talk about. And so let's get into that. The third act of this movie has divided a lot of people, and I can understand why. So after all the deliberations in court, hearing everything, when Arthur walks in for his closing statement, he basically just lets it all out, saying, there really is no Joker, this whole thing about a split personality, none of that, I am Joker. Like, there's only the one person. It makes the case very clear to the jury that he's obviously going to be guilty. And that's the verdict that's being read out, and it's very clear that his life's over. But as this is happening, a car bomb goes off and blows up the courthouse. And then he manages to escape in the process. The judge is dead. Harvey Dent's face, half of it is blown off because, of course. And then he's helped out by these two Joker supporters who take him into a car, and it's like they're the ones who set off the bomb, and they're trying to get him away. And then he escapes the car. And this is a great one shot that they do over here. It's really impressive. And then he goes over to Harley on the stairs, and then there's that whole moment where she's like, yeah, I don't love you anymore because you're not the Joker. And also the pregnancy thing, that was a lie. I was just really trying to get you into something. Again, okay, lots of stuff going on over here. And I like, again, a lot of the ideas. It just doesn't feel like they've had the time to build into that as much as I think the first movie did a better job of it. Like for the first movie, when it's building to the moment where he's at the talk show with Murray Franklin, and then he's talking about how all of it has led to this moment, all the things that he's done, it works a lot better because you've had a lot of time to build up those moments where it's just that pressure and constant, misery that's sort of piling on and on and on and on. Here, there's not that thing going on, but the way that, entire finale is constructed, I feel like some moments could be earned a lot more. And some of that just doesn't happen over here. And it especially doesn't happen with the final thing in the movie. So he gets his sentencing, he's back at Arkham, and he gets told there's a visitor for him. And while he's heading over, one of the other inmates at Arkham stops him and he's like, "Hey Arthur, can you hear a quick joke for a second?" He's like, "Yeah, make it quick." He's like, yeah, I will. And he starts telling the joke, and the punchline is, "You get what you fucking deserve." And then he shanks him, and then Arthur dies. And while he's dying, there's another vision to that dream sequence where he was doing the talk show with Harley and he gets shot, and then he sings the last reprised version of "We're Gonna Build a Mountain Together." That's a song that they were singing earlier. And then that's it. And in the background, the entire time that's happening, this inmate who's killed him is laughing away to, insanity, and he takes the knife and he cuts a smile into his mouth. So it's supposed to be like an Easter egg to the, Heath Ledger Joker. It's obviously not the same Joker. This is a completely different universe. I mean, there's a Harvey Dent over here, unless his face got blown off twice, which is gonna be a little weird if that happened. That's not obviously what's going on over here. I kind of also saw it as a nod to maybe he's the Brian Azzarello version of Joker, because he has a similar thing going on with his smile. Maybe I'm wrong, but, it's just an Easter egg is what it is. But the entire thing over there, too, it just doesn't feel as organically done as it could be. It plays off like this sort of, cruel joke. Like, it's on you guys. You thought he was going to be something big. He's really just some loser. It also doesn't help that even before all this, there's a point where after one of the trial sessions, he makes a comment about the guards being like these fat idiots or whatever. And he comes back, and then Jackie, Brendan Gleeson, who's very good in the movie, he and two other guards take Arthur to the bathrooms, they beat him up, and then they take him to this point where it's heavily implied that they rape him. And then they kill another inmate who is questioning that and showing support for Arthur by singing "When the Saints Go Marching In," like this rally song. And none of this is really addressed after that. Like, those are pretty messed up things. There's no retribution when it comes to those guards. Nothing happens to them. They just kind of go on. And even when they tip their hat to him before he goes to meet his visitor, it also seems to allude that they might have been in on it. Like, I don't know. I guess the idea is that Gotham is a broken society and it's just a complete mess. But I don't know. It just, again, some of those decisions, I guess it adds to those baffling aspects of it, where it's like, I would have maybe, I would say maybe some of this works better if you had a little bit more time to make them matter. You can understand why that leaves a bad taste in the mouth of some people. So by the time the movie wraps up, I remember looking to my friend and I asked him, like, "What'd you think?" And he was like, "I was disliking it for a while, but I hated it after the ending." I don't think a single person who walked out of our theater actually liked the ending. So I'm not sure how many people are going to respond to it when the movie now opens up publicly. I'm curious to hear what those thoughts are, but it doesn't seem like it's gelling well with a lot of folks. But overall, despite that, as I come to the conclusion with this movie, I'm sort of in the same place where I started, which is I'm all kinds of mixed on it. There are things that I like, there are things that I don't like. Overall, it's a step down from the first one, absolutely. But I don't hate it to the point that a lot of people seem to be. I don't think it's the worst comic book sequel ever made or anything. It's just disappointing. I think it could have been a lot better, and it unfortunately isn't. That said, it's not like I'm going to throw that poster out, I have the first ones. I'm going to keep this one too. I'm going to buy the movie when it comes out on disc because I'm curious to see it with the first one, like do a double feature, see how it plays over there. Maybe it's even better. But as it stands right now, it's just a very scattershot movie. And I know that I said I might do a grade for this one, but I still haven't figured out a number. I've been talking to a friend of mine for a few days, like, what's the number you give here? And we kept fluctuating between numbers. We went through 5 numbers, and none of them seem to really match up to what is really the thought process. So at this point of time, let's just leave it at, yeah, whatever. It's what it is. That's life, right? Guys, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you guys thought of Joker Folie. Deux. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who have thoughts on it. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe. Thank you so much once again for watching these videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you guys at the movies.